Welcome to the latest episode of the Low Production High Value Show, a show for and about entrepreneurs.
Welcome to the latest episode. Today's guest is Amy Kelly, a marketing powerhouse, a podcast host, and a passionate community builder who's putting Scotland's booming tech scene on the global map. Through her work with the Broad Tech Podcast, Startup Grind Scotland, and Creative Edinburgh, Amy has made it her mission to showcase the bold ideas and the untold stories fueling innovation in Scotland. Today we'll dive deep into how storytelling isn't just a tool for branding. It's a force for building entire ecosystems, driving momentum, and putting emerging markets like Scotland's on the world stage. Well, hello, Amy. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Andrew. How are you?
Doing all right. Nice to have you with us. Well, let's jump right in. So you find yourself embedded or, at the center point or intersection of marketing, community building, and tech within Edinburgh and more broadly Scotland's tech system. What compelled you, I guess, to push yourself there to help tell the story of what's happening in that system?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I come from a global marketing background. I've worked for global tech companies like YouTube and Google, and I've worked for global agencies. And so when I actually did take a global senior marketing role that brought me, I was down in London for many years, it brought me back up to Scotland. And I was really passionate about sharing as many of the learnings I'd learned with people I'd meet across Scotland on how to do marketing on a global scale. And then for the last 3 years, I've been an independent marketing consultant, and I've worked with a lot of the tech startups based in Scotland. And I think that one of the things that just surprised me was the amount of innovation that happens in this country. We actually have so much going on, especially in the climate tech world. There's just loads happening. And I was massively impressed. I think that it was definitely a want to shout about it on a global level. I think it was definitely almost felt like a bit of a calling, if you want to be cheesy about it. But yeah, I think I was just really excited to take what I've learned and then bring that to Scotland and just help us kind of get on the map a little bit more for our tech innovation. If you ask someone, what do you think of when you think of Scotland? They don't say tech, they say bagpipes or haggis or something else stereotypical. So I really wanted to change that narrative. And, because I'd met so many amazing founders and was just wowed by them, I thought even my colleagues down in London don't know about this. Like, we really need people to know about this. So yeah, so that's that was the reason for starting the Broad Tech podcast, which is showcasing all of these amazing founders. But then I've just loved working with them all on a consultancy basis because I'm trying to get them out of the we're a Scottish company mindset and helping them tell the story on more of a global level. Just really passionate, but it comes down to the people. The people themselves are just so fantastic and inspirational, and I just really wanted to work with them because they're all so wonderful.
Are they excited or this idea of, being local but thinking global? Are they excited by the prospect of that? Or is that a challenge to them? What's been your take as you've worked on a local level but with a global vision?
Yeah, I always say, you don't know what you don't know. So, I think that when I've been working with a lot of the founders, and especially when you're thinking about marketing, there's a standard almost checklist approach that a lot of people go by. You'll be thinking of like the social, the email, the website, the events, or whatever it might be. Like, they'll be coming up with a plan. And I think that one of the things that you're all better at across the pond than we are is shouting about things in more of a, interesting and vibrant way, because there's this modesty that you would find a lot more in the UK where people just don't really shout about it or really take it upon themselves to be the brand as the founder. A lot of people shy away from being open and vulnerable in places like LinkedIn. So I think it's a learning, and the most amount of feedback I get is, oh yeah, I never really thought of it as a global audience. But if you're selling tech and you're in SaaS tech, you have a global audience. You can reach so many different parts of the world, even before you even think about localization and different countries, different languages. You can still sell to so many people across the world. And I think that when I've worked with a lot of the Scotland-based founders, the way they would think about growth might be more kind of small incremental building blocks, whereas you speak to people in Silicon Valley and they will say they want to build, 10x like year on year. The ambition is there. And I think I've just tried to bring that to a lot of the different organizations I've worked with, because you may as well aim big, because what's the point of not trying?
Well, to use your SaaS example, it's the same in Canada as well, that if you're not thinking globally, if you're a SaaS play, Canada itself or Scotland itself is not big enough to make a viable end result. The expression tall poppy syndrome brings me to the question of, is the tech and startup area supportive of one another, or, as you said, people are humble, they don't want to showboat, or like, hey, look at me, look at my startup kind of thing. But is there the other side of that, where if you are too much about, hey, look at me, is the system supportive of it, or does it try to pull people down to the same level, that tall poppy syndrome that people have talked about? Hey, don't get too big, too much of a big head, or like, hey, we're all in this together kind of thing. Don't showboat.
I mean, I guess it's like, depends who you speak to. Like, everyone has different experiences, don't they? And I've definitely heard of some founders that really have, said that we have these big ambitions and we're just going to go big time. And Bina Sharma, who is the CEO and co-founder of CCU International, she was on episode 4 of the Brotec podcast, and she shared that the fact that she put in a press release that, they were going to be the next decacorn and they were going to aim huge, and they were going to, the ambition was there, and they really were shouting about that. And she did say that she experienced a lot of people trying to pull her back down. But my personal experience is the people I spend my time with and the people that I surround myself with are of similar mindset, and they are the ones that do say to aim big and do say go for it and why not, because that's the people I want to be around. I think it's you're always going to come across the people that want to keep you to a certain place because of where they are and how they feel about themselves, and it's just how you deal with that, isn't it? So I think a lot of the startup founders I've worked with have experienced the people trying to pull them back, not necessarily Scotland based, maybe just like across any experiences they've had. And then, there's others that just say, well, no matter what, this is what I'm off to do and I'm going to do it and no one can stop me. So I think we have a very supportive ecosystem here in Scotland. You always get the few people that have like something to say, and like, you get the few bad eggs. But other than that, like, if you have your own personal vision and you surround yourself with those people, I think that's where you genuinely can build your own ecosystem to some degree, because you're relying on the people will support you and help you do your best work. And that's what I've experienced here in Scotland. I've found tons of those people. There's so many amazing people in this ecosystem here that really want to support people, that are just in it for being good people, that want to support good people. So that's been my experience, but I think that there's definitely going to be examples there of when you have had it the other way around, and that's always a shame, and I wish that wasn't the case. But in some ways, it's pretty good it happens here and there, because it helps you get stronger, helps you learn who to deal with and who not to deal with. So yeah.
On the periphery, government grants, supportive programs, accelerators, maybe collaboration with universities. Tell me more about that. Is there support from those kinds of areas as well? And does the entrepreneur or tech community feel supported, or access to funding or grants, or just in-kind kind of services, that kind of thing?
Yes, there's definitely a lot here. There's a lot that people can leverage here. There's different grant funding. I mean, I've actually heard the comment that sometimes there's too much support here in Scotland. There's a lot that's going on, and
Like
people find
too
it
much,
hard.
sorry to interject, is it too much to choose from, or it's like confusing on where to go?
Yeah, just a lot that is there. And I think, it's exactly that, Andrew, because I think a lot of people struggle to know where to go. So that people have put together certain guidebooks, and you have got key players within the space here that try to direct people. But there's a lot of places that people have to go and they might not know to go. For example, I work with one of the accelerator programs called Geovation Scotland, who are amazing, and they're a government funded program as part of the Registry of Scotland and Ordnance Survey, but they also they are really focused on helping prop tech, geotech businesses get off the ground. So they are really in a specific sector. And even just like the more and more people that are learning about them now is the fact that that's an amazing accelerator program here. We have different organizations that help, based on maybe what stage you're at. TechScaler is a program run by a company called Codebase here in Scotland that is definitely doing a lot for early stage to fast growing startups. There's different funding programs that come out all the time. We have a lot that's dedicated to women in entrepreneurship as well, which is great. So there's a lot that happens here, and I think it's not so much like the problem of not being enough, it's the problem of knowing where to go, definitely of how to navigate that support and who to go to at what stage of the business, because a lot of people might go to, one of the accelerator programs that would be better for them down the line. So I think that's the feedback I hear a lot from the startup tech founders here in Scotland is great support, but hard to navigate. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned earlier that like climate tech was one area. I guess sort of two-part question. What are some of the other areas of not just tech, but like industries or solutions that entrepreneurs are focused on that we might here in North America not know that you're focused on? And just as you were saying about support services and funding and so on, is there a gravitation to certain ones? So if I was starting in the tech sector, should I be looking at one area or a couple areas more so than others because they're more likely to be funded?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that there's definitely that interest in climate tech right now. Like anything that can benefit our planet, I think has got eyes on it. Bina Sharma that I mentioned with CCU International, she is building something to help capture carbon emissions and actually reuse it and put it, the whole circularity. And she's really doing so great with that. And then we've got different organizations that are here that are, focused on helping implement technology into like the emergency services. That we have a great founder here called Nick, who's running a company called Emergency Locate that actually is helping people find people in need faster and helping emergency services do great things. So you've got so many like really interesting products across lots of different spaces. Some of the biggest companies to come out of Scotland that are most known are things like Skyscanner. Skyscanner started here in Scotland and has grown into a globally recognized organization. And I think that the location service travel, we're seeing more of those things. There's an amazing company called Desana that's run by Michael Coburn, and I think that's a fantastic company that's helping make everything easier for the workplace and the hybrid ways of working, and how managers and organizations are trying to understand how to make this an easy process for when they're not wanting to buy huge, massive office buildings anymore, but how can they still give this great experience to their employees? So things like that, like there's not necessarily one huge category that comes to mind. There's so many fantastic founders that are building great products in different spaces that are doing great things, but I've not necessarily twigged of like, okay, there's tons of like this kind of thing in Scotland right now. I think that's what I really love about it is the founders I'm meeting all the time. They're building really interesting, quite unique products. It's not people rinse and repeat. It's not copycats. The things I'm seeing coming out of Scotland right now are really innovative and they're very unique. So, that's what I've been really intrigued and proud by, the fact that there's just tons of really unique things coming out of Scotland.
Well, as you're trying to tell the story of I'll call it the whole community with some highlights, and in terms of highlights, is there one entrepreneur or one startup whose story really sort of resonated with you?
In terms of one startup, or just like their story as a personal founder, perhaps, or do you mean like?
Well,
yeah?
I mean, I'll follow your lead. It's like, was it the pain point that their solution was trying to address, or as part of the community, as you come to know some of these founders, maybe it's their story that's quite unique that translates to their success as a startup founder, whether it's their background or just are they thinking about something differently, and that translates to greater success.
Yeah, I mean, there's been so many. The founders I've had on my podcast, the Broadtech podcast, a lot of them have really interesting stories and are quite heartfelt stories. And I feel like one that comes to mind is Rich Wilson, who is the co-founder and CEO of Gig.ai. He is very open about burnout and what he went through working in big corporate, and how much that took the toll on him and how much he had to take a break, and then eventually came up with the idea of gigs. And I think that a lot of that was definitely wanting to run his company and kind of set the rules. So him and his co-founder Craig, they put in, these policies from day dot to say, like, this is how we're going to manage any mental health concerns or anything for it to just look after people as we grow. And I think that was really lovely. And Gig Day is a great product that just helps people being able to like connect, around projects that need to be done and having very specific scope of works. They're working with huge, massive organizations. And I think that ambition is a growth ambition that they've got on a global scale, and they're very driven towards that. But they're also very driven towards looking after one another and their entire teams as they do in the process. So when he was telling his story, I think that was it was quite emotional hearing that, because, hearing how someone wants to go into being a tech founder when it's renowned that so many tech founders actually struggle from a mental health perspective. And so Rich and Craig are really focused on growing Gigged into huge success, which I've no doubt they will do, but they're being very mindful of how they protect their mindset and how they protect their mental health as they do this. And I think it's a great lesson for other tech founders, because so many people rush into it and maybe don't understand how much of a toll it takes on them and how much they really have to look after themselves. And then before you know it's too late. So, I think it's a really, really great value that they're building in from the get-go. So that's been a brilliant story. And then, like, in terms of seeing a problem and then going and solving it, Ewan Cameron, who runs Willow, has got this great video interviewing platform. So in the sense of his pain point was the fact he used to sit with a stack of CVs on his table and having to go through all these CVs and then got sick of that and asked people just to send in a quick video when he was working somewhere else. And then all of a sudden he saw, well, there's a huge, massive gap here for something like this for us to be able to quickly tell if someone would be able to understand the role or communicate well and all these kind of things. And now he's growing Willow into like a really successful business that's helping interview people all over the world. So I think that you've got both the emotional and the practical sense of like how people come up with ideas to run companies. And I think that seeing people like Rich and Ewan like going off and creating something, but the whole thing with Ewan is having that very specific problem to go and solve that's based on something that he's experienced himself. And I'm pretty sure it was the same for Rich as well, because he had worked in recruitment. So I think that if you are a founder that actually has sat in the problem that then you create the solution for, you're really off to like such a great launch pad, because you really understand that problem. Like Nick, who I mentioned earlier, who has Emergency Locate, he actually still works for the emergency services. And he's been really seeing it firsthand in these, control rooms and everything of trying to help people. Is like, we're not able to help these people that are drowning in a pond fast enough. Like I'm on the phone trying to help them, but we can't do that. So how can we do that? And then he's went and thought of this product, Emergency Locate, which is hugely inspirational. He's went and created a tech product to help people save more lives, things like that. I mean, I could shout about all the brilliant founders that I know here in Scotland until I'm blue in the face, to be honest, Andrew. There's so many great ones.
Well, to some degree, they're telling their story. But if you could wave a magic wand, what do you think needs to be done to get their stories told more broadly, to, like, again, going from local to global? And it strikes me, just to add to that, not every founder is comfortable being the face of their organization, to be like the spokesperson, the advocate. They're passionate about the pain point they're trying to address, but that doesn't necessarily translate to they want to be on a global stage, like literally. They still want the company to be discovered and known, but there's for lack of a better word, the introversion. I'm wondering if you can speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually listening to a really interesting podcast yesterday. It's Startups for the Rest of Us, that you might know, and it's a really great podcast. And I think that one of the things on that side of things around like the communication and the getting comfortable with certain situations, it was a really quite empowering lesson that everything is just a skill to be learned. Like you can just go and learn that skill and get comfortable with it. It's ultimately just a way to go and train separately, just the same way you'd approach anything. So I think that there's a few elements to that. I think that definitely from a founder perspective, if they do not feel comfortable being the face of the company, that's fair enough. Like you do you. There's other ways that you can market your business. You might even just find someone else who can be the spokesperson. Because now what we're seeing in places like LinkedIn, people want to hear from people. They don't want to hear from businesses. They want to hear directly from people. So with all of that in mind, it's like, if you can't be the face of your company, can you find someone else that can? And, can you get a spokesperson to be publicly talking about your business in a very human way? So I think that that's always a great thing to kind of keep front of mind, is that's a great media channel right now, is like the CEO, the founder, like someone who can really own that. But beyond that, like really great marketing ultimately would come from creating fantastic content that resonates with your customers, and obviously a great product experience. So, making sure that that's front and center, to making sure that your marketing is focused on adding value and helping your customers. If you focus on that and you're not in front of the camera and you're not talking about your business, but you're focused on that, then I've got no doubt you'd be able to grow your business if you're really focused on genuine, helpful, or entertaining type marketing that is going to engage customers. So it's ultimately a channel selection at the end of the day, and you're choosing one, you're making sure the message is as strong as possible, and you're really being consistent. And I think that's the consistency that's so important as well. So it's never a one size fits all answer, but there's a few different ways to look at it.
When you think about the marketing part and whether the founder is the face or the storyteller, what seems to be resonating with people is storytelling about the entrepreneurial journey. Not just talking about, we have this solution for your problem, but talking about beneath that, or in relation to it, this is who we are, this is how we began, this is what we're trying to accomplish. Follow our journey as we pursue success. And I'm wondering, like, are you seeing that among the community there? This aspect of storytelling as part of the marketing mix about their journey, I should say.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, right? So I think that at the end of the day, if you think about how you like to be marketed to as well, Andrew, and how I like to be marketed to, it depends on what you're selling me. It depends on what the product is. At the end of the day, when I need a flight to Spain, I don't overanalyze every single airline. I just want to get to Spain. So that's the outcome. So if you can tell me that you're going to get me there on time and at a cheaper rate, great. The outcome based, like if you are a product that's like really serves a simple outcome, and you can just be very direct with that customer and what that outcome is, then I don't think you have to overly focus on the storytelling. In fact, there's a lot of companies that are too intrinsic and focus too much on themselves. And they talk about themselves too much. Whereas if you've got a massive brand to build, and depending on what you're selling again, then yeah, like do that brand building, make sure you've got a strong story, and tell stories to your audience in a way that matters to them. So yeah, like there's a personal story, and then there's the use case story. How do you bring your case studies to life in an actual storytelling? That's where I feel like it's a really important thing to consider, is what are you selling, and how do your customers want to be marketed to based on what's appropriate? Is it an outcome, or is it a story that needs to be told based on the brand that you're building, based on the thing that you're selling?
Right. And whether your audience will care about your own story. Striking that balance between, like you said, just give me the cheapest way to get to Spain.
Yeah. Give me the cheapest way, the one that offers a free drink.
That you went through to get to where you are, but get me to Spain cheap.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Well,
yeah.
It's clear you're very optimistic and for the tech community there, but do you also advocate for like being practical, realistic? And I don't mean to say like taking a negative stance, but talking to founders about burnout, and that whatever you want to do, it'll always take longer and cost more than you anticipate. Those kinds of things, like just about realism. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah, and it's something I speak to quite often, because especially in my world of like marketing consultancy, a lot of the time, like someone might have been working with someone before, they've sold them this huge dream, and then they can't actually do that. Like it's just not feasible for them. So no matter what I do, when I am, say, getting really excited about how we can create some great marketing with a client, at the end of the day, if they do not have the resources or budget to be able to execute on that, there's no point in doing that. Like especially from a startup perspective, a lot of the time it's like, right, how can we just leverage like really great champions, really great use cases, really great content, and leverage organic as much as we can, because they just don't have the budget to spend on all of the huge, massive things that you can do when you've got lots more money. So this is the thing, it's trying to be realistic on what your resources are and how you can use those resources to best place yourself in the market. And a lot of the time when I've been working with clients and they are saying, oh, we've been trying this, trying that, and it's just not working for us. And, they're just coming up against roadblocks. And I've just had to, look at how they've positioned themselves. I'm like, well, you haven't even positioned yourselves strong. You've not differentiated. So the core message is not there. Even if you're getting eyeballs on the marketing because you're paying loads of money, like at the end of the day, if your positioning is off, you're literally not going to get the conversions. So, I think it's looking at all of the different elements, and the being realistic part is so important, especially from early stage, because what I see a lot is I will work with founders who are doing a lot of their own marketing because they are a tiny startup, and they will be writing content and producing videos and all of those things. And all of that is a time cost to the company. The founder is the most expensive. For them to be able to take time away from raising investment or trying to get customers or whatever it might be, that's time away from them. So if they're spending a few hours a day doing some marketing that isn't actually cutting, it's not cutting through, it's not resonating with people, but they're trying their best, they're being consistent, they're showing up all the time, but there's just a message that's wrong, that is detrimental to the company. So we've got to be realistic on how time is spent, how money is spent, how we're communicating with customers, and what the priorities are, especially if you've got more than one customer. If you've got multiple customers and different segments, but you're marketing to one specific one, like what about the other ones? Or is that your tier one customer? Do you definitely want to spend all your time talking to them? Is there not other ones that you want to speak to as well? So at the end of the day, there's a lot of education that has to come with what we come in as marketing experts, is to say, ultimately, at the end of the day, wherever you spend your time, whatever it is that you're producing consistently, that's taking time away from something else that you could do that might be a lot simpler. It might take you less time, but at least it's going to resonate and it's going to get you to a goal. So yeah, I'm always pretty direct, I'd say.
Well, but as you are being direct with them, where do you tend to be helping them the most? Is it positioning, working smarter rather than harder? Like, to your point about how costly where they put their time and energy can be. It's like you should be delegating that versus doing it yourself, that kind of like. So where do you tend to be helping the most?
I think it's when they come in and they tell me like all these things that they do. Like I'll usually come in and be like, right, stop doing that. Do you know? Like I think that it will be a direct approach based on what are you currently doing, and then what have you done, and what went well, what didn't. So coming in with the context around the situation. Like I would never just come in and say, well, this is exactly what the best marketing is these days, and this is exactly what you should do, because that's not how it works. I'd be like talking to them about what has been the business so far. How have you consistently shown up in front of your customers? Where have you got existing deals from to date? Where did they find you? All of that great stuff, like really understanding where your customers are. And I think because I tune in so much to their customers, I seem to have a knack for getting into that situation quickly and understanding it from the customer point of view. So I'll question everything that they're saying or telling me or writing about or talking about or producing content on or hosting events on, whatever it may be, just to ask, like, what's the point in that? Like, what is the point in what you're doing? Like, what is it you're trying to do with this? So I think just sometimes asking those very simple questions can be really quite impactful from the very beginning of a new project. I say, just talk me through why you've done these things, which can present loads of, I don't really know why, so I think that's always interesting, because we always feel like we just need to be doing things, don't we? So we just feel like at least if we're doing stuff, then we are showing up and we're doing this. But if you don't have the question,
it must mean we're
exactly
doing the right thing.
Exactly. So if you are not asking yourself why you would do X, Y, Z, then you're sort of going in blind and you are just rushing ahead and closing your eyes almost like and just hoping that something sticks. And that's just not the way that people resonate with brands anymore. If you think about now, like we are so susceptible to marketing in a way that's we're shutting off. And even now with loads of AI, like I feel whenever I'm seeing something that's so obvious, like AI generated content or imagery, I'm just not that interested. I'm like, oh, well, that was AI. It wasn't you. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like I'm getting a little bit more like there's more of the same kind of stuff. And so I usually like to say, how can we be different? How can we show up in a different way? And I think some of that simple question, again, can be quite impactful, because we're asking our customer, like, how can you stand out to your customers in a differentiated way that's going to interest them and go, oh, there's something new. That's great. Let's zone in on that. And I think that's something that definitely I'll try my best to do.
Are they willing to accept, I'll call it tough love, when you say, stop doing
The
that,
majority.
stop doing that?
I'd say the majority are. You always find there's always some people that they go and they want to bring you in as this expert consultant, and you go and you give them all the stuff, and then they go and do the same thing they always did because they're just, they think they're right. And you'll always experience, no matter what job you do, that's always going to be something that happens. So I've just learned to go, yeah, cool. On you go. Like, if you don't want to take it, we've just worked on this, we produced this, but at the end of the day, it's your company, it's your money, you do what you want to do. There's only so much that you can do for someone when you are coming in as a consultant and you're not coming in as the actual, like, in-person, full-time marketing person. So, yeah, it's just taking that with a pinch of salt when it happens.
Choosing your battles.
We'll be back in a moment. And now, a word from our sponsor. Social media has become an imperative for almost every business. Discover how to successfully implement an effective social media strategy that is supported and integrated throughout every part of your organization. With this essential book from our host, Andrew Jenkins, Social Media Marketing for Business, Scaling an Integrated Social Media Strategy Across Your Organization, is now available from Amazon or KoganPage.com. Now, back to the show.
Well, talking about startups, you've spent time at Meta and YouTube. Is there anything from those experiences that, they had no shortage of money, they had no shortage of resources, but those experiences, is there anything you bring from those to help guide in your consulting endeavors with the startups?
Definitely. I think that the biggest lesson I learned there was like action, like how to action things. Because what I was interested, so I've worked for other companies as well. Like I worked for ITV, for example. And when I worked at ITV, I felt like things just worked like a much slower pace. It was like, take this 2 weeks to come up with this campaign or this email or whatever it was. And it was like, oh, that's like a long time because I'd come from agency world. And so when you're coming from agency world that's like so fast and you're just responding to things so quickly, to then go into somewhere that's maybe a bit more traditional like ITV, that was, the broadcast and media, I felt the marketing side of things was quite slow and very slow paced and all that sort of things. And then I went to places like YouTube and Meta back when it was still called Facebook. And like, it was very much really like, this is it. Like, I remember my first 6 months at YouTube, I delivered like 4 different programs and came up with a whole new program. I localized an entire like email communications thing. And I remember being like, oh my gosh, that was like tons of stuff in 6 months.
Mhm.
But I think the pressure on you in those massive tech companies is what helps you act fast. And so even now in my own things that I do with my consultancy, I also run a company called Flux that supports women in UX and design leadership. And that was from when I worked at user testing, and it's kind of continued into its own thing. But running this company, it's like, right, okay, well, I want to do this thing. I want to do it now. So I've learned to act really fast, but I guess the detriment to that is I'm not very patient. So like I want to do things very quickly. If someone sits down with me and said, let's talk about an event we can plan, I'm like, okay, cool, let's think of a date and let's just have a date in our head. And that scares the crap out of people because they're like, oh, we just wanted to talk about an event. I'm like, but there's no point in talking about an event if we just don't imagine a date that this happens on. That's the kind of like urgency that I'll bring, which, as I said, I think can scare people.
Well, but the whole point, they talk about one of the keys to, sounds so blatantly obvious, one of the keys to success is execution. And so to your point about the events, it's like, well, you're planning an event, like, why wouldn't we pick a date? Like, put a stake in the ground and let's and work back from, we're going to, it's the same thing with the release date of a piece of software. We're shooting for like whatever. People will move heaven and earth to meet that deadline. And if there's unforeseeable circumstances that makes that untenable, so be it.
Exactly. And I think that's it. You've got to have, as much as you've got a vision and you've got all these things in your head, if you're not putting things actually into execution and you're not making things move ahead, what's the point in wasting all this time thinking of stuff? Like when people present with massive strategy docs to me and huge, massive project plans, I'm like, right, how much time did that take? Like, let's just literally choose a date, phone up, book a venue, and then start moving forward with something. Like, let's get stuff going, depending on obviously what it is. Like, I'm not trying to oversimplify it too much. Like, there's a lot that has to be discussed, especially if there's huge strategies and a lot of money being spent. But at the end of the day, if we're talking about doing something for a specific objective to get in front of an audience, to help them do something specific, and we've chosen an event, like, why not at least just choose a date? Like, the very bare minimum, just choose a date and try your best to stick to it, work back from that, so that at least you know that's your rough project plan and that's how you're going to turn an idea into reality. So I say, back to your original question, Andrew, it definitely, the YouTubes and Googles of, the YouTube and Meta experience just really made me a fast action person, which I really appreciate, because I don't think I was that before that.
Well, I mean, it's a fast-paced world. So if you're not executing, somebody else is. Again, that sounds blatantly simplistic, but it is the reality.
Sure.
One,
yeah.
And this leads me to, I wanted to sort of revisit, you touched on AI and the fact that, as people are adopting AI and incorporating it more into their workflow and things like that, there are entities and people becoming more productive. They're moving faster. And again, so the idea of, will AI take my job? Well, the cliche now is AI is not going to take your job, but someone who knows how to use it just might. All that to say, what are you seeing and what are you guiding folks with about AI and incorporation into marketing, workflow, that kind of thing? Where are you seeing it being used most, and used well and used poorly?
Yeah. So just like the first thing I'll say is I'm using AI all the time, right? So everything I say after that, please just remember that part. I am using AI all the time. But the one thing I want to say about AI is that I think that like with ChatGPT, it like coming to market and it was like this whole, like people just went, oh my God, AI, AI, AI. And I think there was a huge, massive focus that shifted from maybe what people were doing already to like, how do I use AI? Because it became such a like massive topic of every conversation was, we need to be using AI. And so the conversations I started to notice was shifting toward like, from just, we want to get in front of this audience, how can we do that? What channels should we use? To how can we use AI in our business, into our marketing? And I noticed that in just so many conversations and thinking, okay, the mindset's changing with marketing and people are freaking out the same way that probably back in the day when CRM systems came into place and, like any technology like change or marketing automation, and everyone's probably, oh my God, how do we automate? Right. So like, I'm sure that was what happened back when, the Marketos of the world and everything came into place. So I've no doubt that this is just the same thing again. But like what I'll say to everyone is like, just remember that AI is going to help you get to that end goal. So what's the objective? What's the end goal? And then yes, like if there's things and tasks that you can use AI to do in your marketing, then let's use those. But let's not look at it back to front with like, how do we use AI? And let's design a plan around that thing. Like I've seen literally people stop what they're doing to incorporate this AI tool because they've heard it's amazing and they want to just like shift everything to use this AI tool. I'm like, but you were focused on something else. Like, why would you stop this whole program just to like go and build AI into your practice? So all of these things I've noticed as a shift in behavior. And then the one thing I keep saying to everyone is like, use AI to help you automate the tasks that take you too long. Like I love using AI to like get me to a certain point with some copy or things, but I always go back in and make it my own, but I think it's great for that. Like you'll brainstorm positioning copy or messaging, key messaging. You'll just ask for a few different variations of it through ChatGPT, and then you'll see ideas that gives you to then work on what you already had. And that's so great. Use that to like help you get to a really clean messaging framework or a really great article or really great white paper that still starts you off, like, whatever it might be, like help that get you to the next stage 100% because it's there to be used. But just don't let it take over the output. So now when I'm saying like, even if people put up a new profile photo on LinkedIn that's an AI avatar, or like, using AI imagery in all the blog posts or all this kind of stuff, I'm like, I just don't like it that much then, because it's just, we know it's not real. So I don't feel great as a consumer looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
If I see that's like, there's someone that I love following on LinkedIn because I know them well, but now I'm seeing that they're using tons and tons of AI copy. Like, it just looks so AI written.
Mm-hmm.
And it just makes me feel differently about that person's content. I'm like, oh, well, they're just using AI and it's
Yeah.
very obvious, even though the content's there. It's just the emotional reaction from me personally is that just don't let it overcome and take away from the beauty of what the output is. So if you were thinking about doing video or you were thinking about doing beautiful imagery or whatever it might be, like don't use AI to replace that. So what I think like genuinely right now is a massive opportunity for organizations right now is that everyone's using AI imagery, everyone's using AI video. And if you invested in getting a brand bank of beautiful first-hand photography, like that's what I've done with Flux. Like if you go to fluxmember.com, you will see, except from the header image, which we do actually need to change that, but everything else on that is our own photography, it's our own videography that we've invested in. And that's what's helping people stand out. And I get comments all the time, like, I love the marketing for Flux. Like, it's so honest, it's so genuine. I'm like, because it's real stuff, it's real people, it's real photography, it's real imagery, it's real video. Yeah. And that was the big word years ago, wasn't it? It was like everyone was talking about authenticity. And now we're just talking about AI. Like, what the hell happened?
Well, to your point about if people are using an AI-generated headshot or they're doing the caricature of themselves that they used AI to create for their headshots, like that version of you isn't doing business with other people. It's not going to networking events or like it's cool because it shows that you used AI, but it's still not you. Like it, to your point, it's kind of putting this arbitrary layer or friction between you and who you're trying to reach. But as you're saying, the fear or the concern is don't allow yourself to be pulled into this. This is the bright new shiny thing that's taken my attention. And
Yeah.
when you talk about, don't use AI if it's not necessary. Don't get trapped by that. But the phrase I'm using myself, but I'm advising others, and I'm hearing from other people too, is that when you're in the midst of something, ask yourself, could AI help here? And use that sort of as a filtering criteria. And if it can't be, or to your point, if it's too much of a distraction, both in terms of cost and time and so on, well, let's leave it out here for now. Like, this is the way we've always done it. It works fine. Let's not upset the apple cart and put AI in here when it's not particularly necessary.
Yeah, and I think the good thing to mention about AI is the fact that it is leveling the playing field. Like there's no longer this huge need to go and spend thousands and thousands and thousands with creative agencies as there was in the past. And it's the big companies that could afford 10 to 15 grand a month on creative agencies to do design work for them. You now do have a lot of design tools. But I think that for me, I'm like, don't forget about the designer though. Even though you don't have to go and spend 10 to 15 grand, still make sure that you're trusting the design expert somewhere within this process, because the people should never be replaced in the sense of that designer still knows a lot more than you. So even if you're on Canva and you're having a great time and you've made all these things, you're like, oh wow, shiny stuff. That's great, but if you're not a designer, you don't actually know. And if you do not have a brand guidelines and everything's like right there for you to play with, that's even worse. Like you really still got to make sure, no matter where, if it is copy, design, video, whatever it might be that you're leveraging AI for, ensure that you've got the expert that is in that field to be able to control that and give feedback and help you get to that next stage, because ultimately that's really what's going to help you use AI to do loads of the things the massive companies do already. So you are on the same playing field. You can leverage more kind of sustainable in terms of money. It's more affordable products to be able to get to a certain outcome, which is so great. It's so great for startups that now they can actually get tons of rating and get imagery and all these kind of things. Great, great, great. But just do not lose sight of the sense of there is still an expert that can help you in that process. I think that's the most important thing.
I remember asking a friend of mine who's an industrial designer, gave an amazing presentation about showing absolutely gorgeous designs and creative using Midjourney. And I asked them, and I mean, he's been like 40 years as an industrial designer, and he's prof and author about innovation and so on. And I said, does this suggest that, industrial designers could be replaced? He goes, no, the industrial designer has been trained on the fundamentals of design and so on, and can look at an AI output to know whether it is a viable design, can critique it with an expert eye. And the analogy I'm using is this is a new paintbrush, but you still have to be an artist. And to your point earlier about that it's not replacing a designer. In fact, if you're not a designer, this may help you work with a designer more efficiently. AI can help you write a design brief because you can just dump your ideas, and you may not be, if you're struggling to articulate what you want to a designer, it may actually help you have a more productive and perhaps expedited interaction with the designer. Maybe I'm being too
definitely.
optimistic. I don't know.
No, I think it is. It's looking at the task, isn't it? So it's like focus on the output being as genuine, authentic, and connected to you as a brand, as a company, and connected to your customers. And then to get to the output, just see where you can use AI to work faster and better and cheaper. Like why not? Like that's always going to be a great thing to do. But just be careful with it. Yeah, just be careful and don't make it the focus of your marketing how to use AI. Like have it there, but just focus on the other stuff.
Make it part of the toolkit, but don't give it unnecessary emphasis.
Yes.
The one thing I wanted to make sure that we cover is where are you advising startups to where are you advising them to look at from a channels of media channels for outreach or just for visibility? Where are you suggesting they spend their time and energy from a visibility point of view, from a marketing point?
Again, it totally depends on the company and the people that they're serving. So, like my first question is like, where are your customers already? What channel are they on? So that's then how I'll work back and say, right, where are your customers and how can you show up in front of their customers? Like I worked with a client recently who was actually getting tons of traction on Reddit because their customers were there talking about the problem. So that was really interesting. And it's a channel I'd never really thought of as much. Like there's loads of channels that we kind of forget, like especially community forums and all this thing. And obviously your standard channels, like your social media is always important. Your email touch points, your own kind of own channels are so important. And then everything else is understanding beyond what's your always on. Like how are you consistently showing up, because that's where your clients are, depending on what channel they are on. And then whatever that always on is great, and that's the consistency building, momentum building thing. And then what are the big moments that you want throughout the year? So maybe that is a tentpole event that you host once a year. Maybe this is like a report that you launch once a year. Whatever that big moment is, that's where you might experiment with a channel that's in front of people, that's really, really going to be a bit of interesting way to approach this, whatever that might be. So I think it's about trying to understand the most appropriate way to communicate with your customers that's aligned to what it is that you're doing or trying to do. Sometimes events are so great and sometimes they're not, depending on what it is that you're wanting to tell them. Like if it's a case of you just need to drive more usage in your SaaS tech product, like there's no point in doing this huge, massive event. Like you might just need a few emails. Like you might need some in-product notifications. Yeah. You might just need something that's very much like that's your channel because that's the problem you're trying to solve as the marketing, and that's exactly where you should show up now. So I think it's experimenting all the time. Like I actually love running events, so I do, if there's ever an event to run, I love doing that. I love LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn all the time. And I think that, but that's where I'll get some of my customers from. So yeah, it just depends. Like, I think it's ultimately just figuring out what's the most appropriate channel for what it is that you're trying to do and where your customers are.
Mm-hmm. Well, as we come to a close, I want to tap back into your optimism and ask you, when you look 5 years ahead, what do you envision for the tech community there? And what do you hope for the tech community there?
I would love for more people to know across the world how amazing Scotland-based tech founders are and what it is that's being built here, how much innovation is still being built here. We came up with some of the biggest products in the world, like here in Scotland, that started the television, the telephone, steam train, steam engine, I think, and penicillin. There was so many massive innovation that started from this country. I would just love to think in 5 years, especially through the work that we're trying to do with the Brotech podcast, is we'd love for more people just to know what's going on here, to drive more support. I would love to see more Silicon Valley tech companies opening up in Scotland. You know, that's what brought me back to Scotland, was user testing was opening their European HQ in Scotland. I'd always wanted to move back to Scotland. I was in London for 7 years, and then I finally came back up the road, as they say, Scottish boomerangs were called. And, you know, like, it was really great to come back up to Scotland, but still to work for a global company and to be back and forth to the US all the time, or traveling the world and running global marketing programs. And I was very lucky to get that job, and it completely transformed my career. You know, my career at user testing was hugely transformational to everything I do now, and user testing still support me to this day. You know, they're sponsoring the Broad Tech podcast, they sponsor Flux, like, you know, like they've been great, you know, from then to now. And I think that I'd love to see more of those tech companies that are global coming to Edinburgh, Glasgow, and setting up there. You know, so that's something, if I could imagine 5 years' time, I would love to see more of those huge tech companies having a European base in Edinburgh, Scotland, and Glasgow, Aberdeen, wherever it might be. Like, I'd love to see more of that.
Well, from your mouth to our listeners' ears. here's hoping. Listen,
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time and for shedding light on what's happening there. And like I said, let's remain optimistic and see what happens in the next 5 years.
Fingers crossed. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Low Production High Value Show. Be sure to give us a rating and subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode. Don't forget to check out Volterra at volterradigital.com to learn more about how they can support your social media marketing.